First of all, thank you all for joining us during your lunch hour. I know this time is precious. I am Anne Choquette. I am the CEO of TheLi.st. I am thrilled to be presenting our new series, The Bestseller List. And we're kicking it off with Laura Gassner-Otting and her amazing book, Wonderhell, which really is the most amazing title for a book ever. I think that if you're going to judge a book by its cover, this is an amazing cover. There you go. Candace has got it there for you. It is a roller coaster of success. And so I am going to get out of the way. I'm going to ask everybody to mute themselves, to save your questions for about a half an hour and then post them in the chat. Feel free to use the chat to like yes and +1 and share your thoughts as we go. I'm turning it over to author Laura Gassner-Otting and Candace Cook, Chief Strategy Officer of Radical Media, who knows a thing or two about what it feels like to be successful and step into the big role. I am going to fade into the background and let you two take it away.
Thank you, Anne. Laura, I want to first just start with the floor and hand it over to you. First, greetings, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's exciting to see you, and I'm thrilled that we are celebrating this book. I want to do a brief introduction of you for those who are not familiar with your brilliant history. Laura, executive, exited a company. She then took her chance on a governor from Arkansas, went ahead, worked on his campaign, went to the White House, was instrumental in AmeriCorps, and then became an executive for her own company with a lead executive search firm, which she then exited and was able to move and become a brilliant writer. I think that story and trajectory is critically important because it led her to Limitless. And while the focus of today's conversation is on Wonderhell, I think the premise of Limitless, which is essentially first getting over your own fears and doing what you need to do, is the start before we even get to Wonderhell. So can we just talk a little bit about that and then move into Wonderhell? Because I honestly think it's part of the drive.
Yes, it is. It is so much. And thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate the list for having me. And Candace, it's so awesome of you to volunteer to be part of this. I will say, and I love that Anne is wearing her Limitless yellow because, the book is yellow, Limitless. One of the fun things that we did with Wonderhell, it's like a little Easter egg for people, is that the actual Wonderhell book is also yellow. So we're keeping it in the family. I apologize for my voice. I woke up on an overnight flight a few days ago with this happening. So I hope it will be okay. I spent 20 years in executive search, and my job as an executive recruiter was to call the most successful people in the world, recruit them away on behalf of my clients, which sounds like kind of a hard job, except despite, I would call them because they were super successful, but despite the success, they weren't very happy, which is why they all called me back, right? You've all gotten calls from recruiters before, and you're like, that sounds interesting. I don't know. And the more you think about that potential other job, the more you start seeing holes in where you currently are. And I thought it was fascinating to me. We'd all been sold this line that once you're successful, you'll be happy. And I was so intrigued by the fact that all of these people were successful, but they were all calling me back. And so the book Limitless really came out of this question that I had of why doesn't success equal happiness? I thought about my own career. I thought about dropping out of law school, joining that presidential campaign. I thought about leaving the White House, joining that big marquee search firm. I thought about leaving the marquee search firm, founding my own, and then eventually selling that to the women who helped me found it. And also the handful of people who I wasn't able to recruit away during that career, those 20 years in executive search. And what I realized was that we shouldn't be pursuing success. We should be pursuing consonance, this idea of alignment, of flow, when what we do matches who we are, so that we're not struggling for work-life balance, but we're really trying to find work-life alignment, where we're not, doing too much, and that's why we're exhausted. We realize we're doing too much of what doesn't matter to us, and that's why we're exhausted. So how do we create a life that actually works for us? And so Limitless is really based around this framework of consonance, which is made up of, what's my calling? What do I really want to be doing? What inspires me and excites me? How much is my work connected to that calling every single day? How does that work contribute to the lifestyle that I want, the life I want to live, the values I want to manifest? And how much can I actually control what's happening in my world so that I get paid for the amount of hustle that I have. I get to choose who I work with. I get to choose who my clients are. And so the idea of limitless is really, how do we define success for ourselves? And then Wonderhell jumps off of that and it says, okay, well, now you've started to feel some success. Why is it getting more stressful? And that's
So
where
I
Wonderhell
love
picks
that.
up.
I love that as the lead in. And I think I'm not saying it just because we're on this call. I really do think both books are worth your time and energy, but because we want to have book sales on the latest and greatest, if you have to prioritize, let's go with Wonderhell. But I really do think both are the train and the tracks that get you to
Yes.
where you're going. When I look at this book, and again, I really do think the amusement park idea is brilliant. I want to start the framework of the book really is addressing fear, but it's fear from a place of power. I think so many people look at fear as this weakness and this inability to actually deal with the conflict. And really what the book does is it sets in place the fact that fear is a component of power when you realize what you can do with the fear. And
Yes.
so I want to talk about a line that you have in the book that I just think sets the tone for so much. Every new level has a new devil. Let's talk about what that means in brass tacks real world.
Yeah. So, it was very funny. I just got a Kirkus review of the book, and one of the lines in the Kirkus review says, it's kind of a risky narrative. Like, who finds successful people to be compelling? Like, who finds them to be great, heroes of books? But the truth is, all of us, every time we achieve anything, whether we've sold a business or we sold our first tube of lipstick, right? Like, whatever the thing is, you see this success, you feel this emotion you haven't felt before. And inside of that emotion, it's excitement and it's amazing and it's wonderful. And also you see a version of yourself where you're like, I didn't know that was possible. I wonder what else I could do, right? And suddenly you have the burden of your potential that sits on your shoulders and is like, hey, Candace, what you got for me? Like, what are you going to do with this newfound potential you didn't even know existed last week, last month, last year? But who can we complain about that to? Who can we talk to about that? Because, right, it's lonely at the top. It's like, we can't complain about, oh, I was successful. Now what? And yet inside of each success, we don't find happiness. We don't find fulfillment, because every time we have that success, we see that version of ourselves that we didn't know was possible. And so we find that faster pace, that bigger hunger, that desire for more. And I'm not saying like this book is all about like bigger, better, faster, more. What I'm saying is that inside of that, there is a tsunami of emotions that come at us. And some of those emotions we can talk about, and some of those emotions we don't get to talk about when we still have to wrestle with, whether it's imposter syndrome or doubt or insecurity or uncertainty or fear or exhaustion or burnout or any of those things. And so, I found myself in that moment of Wonderhell when the last book came out and it was successful. I didn't expect it to be successful. Like, I literally thought 3 people would buy it, like my mom, my dad, and maybe my sister, like used from my mom. But it was a Washington Post bestseller. And in that moment, I had just left an event where I was one of the like undercard speakers for Malala, right? Like, there are 5 speakers, and Malala was the final speaker. It was like the 3rd keynote I'd ever given in my life. And the next morning was my goddaughter's bat mitzvah. Can't miss Malala, can't miss my goddaughter's bat mitzvah. So I'm on a red eye, right? So I'm on this red eye, and my client, and I would only say this to this group because it sounds obnoxious about it, but my client had booked me this beautiful, like, lie flat first class seat. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'm too old for red eyes, but like, I'll do that. So I'm on the red eye, and they deboard us because they're like, oh yeah, we've had some mechanical issues. We got to put you on a different plane. So they put me on a different plane. And then I'm like in this tiny little seat, like between these 2 giant linebackers, and I'm not sleeping. And in the middle of that, so completely exhausted, where the part of my brain that normally governs my humility like disappeared into the ether, I heard a little voice going, Washington Post, eh? What about the New York Times? Like, what else can you do? Like, this thing's got legs. Like, if only you sacrifice everything you have to it. And I wouldn't normally do it, except I saw that version of myself and then I couldn't unsee it. And so that's what I mean when I say every new level has a new devil, because each time you get to that new level, there's a new little voice on your shoulder going, what else is out there? And could you do it? And should you do it? And do you want to do it? And how do we figure that out when we can't say, oh, I've been successful. Poor me. Now what?
So what I love, especially in this moment in time, I don't know how many of you are able to pretend that you're not reading the trades and seeing how the world is semi-crumbling down around all of us, is I essentially reverse engineered Wonderhell. I started at the back and worked my way forward. And what I love about starting at the back, and it's all the tools, right? So I don't want to spoil the book because I really do want you to read it, but it's all the tools and looking at how you're going to lay out playing. And the book is in the sort of idea of an amusement park.
Oh, yes.
Can we talk about why an amusement park? And then the follow-up question, I'll go ahead and sort of like not bury the lead. In looking at the world falling apart and making these choices and conquering fear, within the construct of the amusement park, we talk about learn to play bigger. You address learning to play bigger. And I think for individuals who think they already are playing in the biggest landscape, this idea of the challenge of learning to play bigger can seem like a very abstract idea. But no, it's make no small plans. So let's talk about the amusement park and what that looks like, and then learning to play bigger within this idea of the amusement park.
Yeah. So the book is, as Candace mentioned, it's organized like an amusement park because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, Rahaf Harfoush. She wrote a great book called Hustle and Float. And I was saying, it's just like, I don't know how to organize the book. And I know it should be like, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's what to do about it. But everybody experiences a different emotion in these moments, depending on where they are in their own journey. And she's like, it's kind of like an amusement park where like you can walk in and you can go to any town you want at any time you want, and you just need a map. It's like, you are here. So the book is organized as an amusement park. Like, you thought the amusement park was going to be super fun, right? Like, you're going to go to all the rides. It's going to be amazing. And then you get there and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you're like a little sunburned and you're definitely dehydrated and your kids are whining and that corn dog in your stomach is threatening to make an exit, like on the, roller coaster line that you don't even know if you want to go on. And I was like, yeah, like, it's kind of like success. Like, you think it's going to be fun and then you get there and it's really a lot harder. And you're like, I thought this was going to be fun. Like, why isn't this fun? So we use the idea of the amusement park to organize the book. And the book has 3 sections: Imposter Town, Doubtsville, and Burnout City. And then in each of these 3 towns, there are rides. So each of the rides then is one of the emotions. So in Imposter Town, the very first one, of course, is the Imaginarium, learning to play bigger. You walk in to it one person, and then you get this vision of who you could be. Maybe you see the vision yourself. Maybe you have a coach who sees something in you. Maybe you have a boss who lays down the gauntlet, right? There's somebody in your life who's like, do more. And then you see it. And once you see it, you walk out of the Imaginarium a completely different person. And throughout the book, I interviewed 100 different glass ceiling shatterers, Olympic medalists, startup unicorns, everyday people like, all of us. And what I learned in this chapter is that this happens in one of 2 ways. Either you think you're walking down a certain path and everything's going to go that way, and then something jostles, right? You either, like, there's a threat to your business, there's a threat in the world, you have to suddenly show up as a different person. Or there's somebody who finally gives you permission to think about yourself in a way that you hadn't thought about it before. And one of the stories I tell is Sally Krawcheck, who I think a number of you probably know. She's the founder of Ellevest. And Sally Krawcheck, she is the only person who has the great misfortune of being fired on the Wall Street Journal, not once, but twice, cover the Wall Street Journal. And Sally, she ran Smith Barney, she's, run big banks on Wall Street. And one day she was sitting there, she tells me the story. She looks into the Zoom camera and she's like, I was putting on my mascara. You know how we do it with like one eye and our mouth open. I'm putting on my mascara. And I was thinking to myself, the women's savings crisis, the savings crisis is really a women's crisis. Women get different messages about money. We get different messages about investing. Somebody should do something about this. Who knows Wall Street? Who can be inured to rejection? Who understands all of this? And she was like going through all the kinds of things a person would need to do. And she's like, I'm the only one It's got to be me. And she thought about way back when she was in high school. She told me the story where she was like walking down the hallway with her high school boyfriend. It was like this cute jock, and a counselor came up and said, did you see your SAT scores? Did you see what you got? And that woman gave her permission to think about herself in a way that she would not have thought about herself otherwise. And so she thought back to that high school counselor, and she was like, yeah, she was like, she would have told me to go for it. And now Sally Krawcheck runs a $2 billion under management investment platform by women for women. But sometimes we just need that person. And so the question that I ask people is, who is in your life? And are they giving you permission to think bigger about yourself? Are they forcing you to not settle for mediocrity? Or do you have people in your life who are sort of holding you back and holding you down? And I think all of us can probably think about some of those people in both of those camps.
It's crazy because there are two follow-up lead-ins in the book that speak to that as well, right? There's letting go of your demons. And when I think about adulthood, I also see it as the amusement park. You go in anticipating so much. I feel they sold us a rack of goods, nap time, bad when you're little, nap time now, I'm craving it, mandatory snack time, I'm all for it. Why did we let it go? Your book talks about letting go of your demons. And then it also then goes into going back to making these shifts. If you're incapable of leaning into Wonderhell, which is in itself a gift, you will stay where you are, and that becomes a completely different type of hell. Mm-hmm. Can we talk about fear of moving forward under the false premise of a net when there is no such thing in real life as a safety net? The net is the illusion. And so holding on to what feels safe is a lie, because there is no such thing as safe. Let's talk about it, because I'm there. I'm with you.
Yeah. I mean, inaction is still a choice, right? Like, not going forward is still a choice. There's a there was a great study that I found that I referenced in the book that said that people who flip a coin and the coin says go forward, whether it's take the job, leave the husband, whatever the thing is, right? Like, people who flip a coin and the coin says do the thing end up years down the line happier about the decision, whether the decision worked out well or not, than the people who flipped the coin and the coin said don't do anything at all, right? Action beats stagnation every day of the week. So I think we have to think about not just what is the price if we fail, but what's the price if we don't move forward at all? I'd rather live with, I'd rather live with the embarrassment of failure than the haunting regret of not actually trying. Because I do think that failure is that fulcrum. It's the place from which we learn and we grow and we iterate and we change. I have a line in my Limitless keynote where I say, failure's not finale, it's fulcrum. And then I gave it one time, and there was an astronaut in the first row, and I was like, failure's not finale, it's fulcrum, except for you, sir. For the rest of us, as long as there's blood in our, our veins and oxygen in our lungs. But I was like, I think it's pretty safe to say that for most of us on this call, like, failure, like, it's not going to be the end of the world. My favorite Eleanor Roosevelt quote is, we would worry much less about what other people thought about us if we realized how seldomly they did. Like, nobody's actually paying attention. So, like, the fear of embarrassment shouldn't be holding us back. Then there's the question of, like, well, what if things go wrong? Like, what do I do? And I do a lot of guest lecturing at entrepreneurship programs. And there's always somebody in the back of the room who's like, what's the question? Like, well, how long did it take to write your business plan? And I was like, give me a cocktail napkin. Like, I didn't have a plan. I had business. So I started. You just start and you figure it out as you go along. And they'll always say, like, well, what would you do if you fail? So I turn the question around and I say, okay, well, you're in an entrepreneurship class. You think you're an entrepreneur. What will you do if your plan fails? And the answer is always the same. The answer is, well, I guess I just go get a job in a cubicle and figure it out until I make the next plan. And then I will go forward with that. And I'm like, okay, so you have your plan B. You got it, put in a drawer, fine. What will you do if you succeed? And I've literally never had anybody answer that question. Like, it's always crickets. Because I think we do spend so much time worrying about failing that we don't think about worrying about what we'll do if it actually works. And because we're not thinking about that, then we're actually not able to take advantage of the opportunities that come. The second chapter in the book is The Fortune Teller, where I talk about the science behind making your own luck. And some of the ways that you make your own luck is to be optimistic, to be extroverted, to turn these lessons into positives. And I think if we're spending too much time worrying about staying where we are or not moving forward. We're not spending enough time thinking about what will happen if it works out well. And so we don't really give ourselves any choice in that matter.
And the false illusion, going back to the house of illusions,
Yes.
that any choice you create has a note of safety to it. Because
Yes.
if COVID taught us anything, it's that there is no such thing as a fully unstoppable, can't be penetrated plan. Anything can happen and those plans can pivot. And what do we do then? And that's what the book is addressing.
Yeah. And the thing about this, the safety net is, you know, so many of us on this call are the first of, right? Or one of the few who are doing what we're doing. So there's not a chart, right? There's not a roadmap. One of the stories that I tell in that chapter is Jen Welter, who was the first female NFL coach. And, you know, the interview I did with her, she was hilarious. She's like, man, she goes, when I first started, like she actually played for the NFL for a year. And she's like, when I first got to training camp, I was like, coach, you're either going to have to cut me or kill me because I'm not quitting. She's like, I knew that I was going to be the first, but I was dead set on not being the last. And so she told me this great story. I was like, well, how did you do it when you started coaching? How did you do it? Like, there was no roadmap. There was no safety net. There was no guide. And she said, well, I couldn't do what everyone else did. Because if I went up to these players and I tried to yell at them, I'd be toe to toe, but I'd be like eyeball to belly button, right? Like I couldn't get up in their face. I couldn't do the thing where like the coach yells at you. She's like, so I became the master of the quiet lean in. I would just kind of go up, I kind of lean in. They'd have to lean into me and I'd whisper. And I'd whisper, and they could see, they knew that I loved the game. They knew that I loved them. And because they knew that I had their best interests at heart, they not only leaned in, they not only listened, but when I was done, they said, what else you got for me, coach? So I think a lot of times we're like, where's the safety net? How do I do it exactly how everybody else did it? But look, everybody wants to be special, but nobody wants to be different. And the truth is that what makes us special is often the thing that makes us different. And so it's really important to lean in to what makes us unique, especially if we're the first of or one of the few, because that's actually the value that we bring to the table.
What I love about that too, to the things that people don't want to do or be, I think the book focuses on learning how to take a punch. And so I think
Yes.
so many times individuals are focused on, yes, resiliency. And I think resilience is critically important, but part of being able to be in the ring, it's not just learning how to hit, it's learning how to take the punch and what that feels like. And recently I heard someone say, it's very difficult to try and say you want to break glass ceilings, but that you also don't want to get cut. Part of breaking the glass ceiling is accepting that there will be cuts, and it's sort of how we bandage and move forward. But with that, I think human nature is uncertainty. And you talk about managing uncertainty and what that looks like. Can you speak a little bit more about managing uncertainty in Wonderhell?
Yeah, so I do that several different times in the book. One is the beginning of Doubtsville, where I talk about the roller coaster itself, right? And it's really uncertain. You get out on the edge, you have no idea what you're doing. Here's the good news that nobody else does either. When I did these 100 interviews, I was like, I'm in Wonderhell. I'm going to talk to these amazing people and I'm going to find my way out. I'm going to find a solution. Okay, bad news, there's not a solution. Good news, Wonderhell only presents itself to people who are worthy of it. Like, you would not be in this place if there wasn't actually more you could do. Like, you wouldn't see this potential if it wasn't there available to you. There are a lot of people who are very happy, very complacent where they are. So bad news, there's not a solution. Good news, on the other side of this Wonderhell is just the next one and the next one and the next one. And so managing uncertainty is really important because we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because that's where we're going to be. Like, every time you're out on the bleeding edge of your incompetence, which is where I like to be, like 9 toes over the edge, like not fully there, but like 9 toes over the edge of incompetence. That's where it's exciting. I mean, Candace, like, have you ever said, like, I want to go take on a new job or take on a new role that you've already done before? Like, you want to do stuff you haven't done because it's interesting, right?
I'm with you. Yes. Amen. Quarter over here. And I think we don't feel a purpose unless it is the purpose. And the secret sauce of who we all are is what we're called to do. And I think the more you deny your purpose and you deny the world of whatever that calling is, it's not just a denial that's self-centered, it's a denial for society. And I think we owe society better than that because we only have one secret sauce. So no, I'm with you.
Absolutely. So I interviewed Carrie Lorenz for the book, and Carrie is the first female F-14 fighter pilot of the US Navy. Okay. Now, Carrie and I are good friends. We were not good friends when I first met her. So I'm going to tell you two stories about Carrie. The first is how she and I got to be good friends. And the second is what she taught me in Wonderhell. So Carrie stands 6 foot tall, raven brown hair, wears leather from head to toe. She won the head of the Charles as a rower when she was in college. And the only reason she left pre-Olympic training was to go to officer candidate school to become that, F-14 fighter pilot. So like, you look up badass in the dictionary, there's a photo of beautiful Carrie Lorenz right there. Not only that, she's married, 4 children, like she's just like incredible. So I called her up when Limitless was about to come out, and I'm like, I've got the manuscript. It hasn't gone to print yet, but I'm like, would you maybe think about possibly even one day pondering blurbing my book? She was like, yes, I'll do it. You're a badass woman. I want to support badass women. Awesome. So I sent her my manuscript. She calls me up 3 days later, and I think I'm going to get praise. Spoiler alert. Didn't get praise. And she said, and I'm going to curse a blue streak right now, and I apologize for this, but there's really no way to tell the story without cursing because well, you'll understand. She calls me up. She goes, Laura, you're really fucking smart, and the book is really fucking good, but you're too fucking smart for the book just to be really fucking good. You need to make it really fucking great, and then I'll blurb the shit out of it. Okay, was not praise. However, what I got from that was somebody who didn't let me settle for mediocrity, for somebody who was going to absolutely make sure that I was bringing my very best to what I was doing. And so how do we handle uncertainty? How do we handle, I don't know, I'm not sure, I'm putting this book out into the world, I don't know what I'm going to do. We make sure we have people that are with us who have walked the path before, right? She put out a Wall Street Journal best-selling book. It was really fucking great. And I knew that when she called me and she called me out, that she was going to actually help me get to where I wanted to get to. So that's the first lesson I got from her. The second one, which I write about in Wonderhell, because I probably didn't want to curse a blue streak in the book, is when you are a fighter pilot and you are landing a ginormous multi-billion-dollar aircraft on a tiny postage stamp in the middle of like 30-foot swelling seas, it's pretty stressful. And apparently the human mind is only capable of thinking about 3 things at once. Meatball, line of attack, right? There's certain things that they figure out. And so she knows that at any given time, like she's landing this aircraft carrier, or she's landing this aircraft on the aircraft carrier, and the average age of the person working on that aircraft carrier, the serviceman, is 19 years old. Right. So like her life is in the hands of a 19-year-old who's probably hasn't done this that many times. And by the way, you don't get 10,000 hours of practice. Like you just go. And so when the pandemic hit, what she did is she put a little Post-it on her screen on her computer that said family, finances, and fitness. The only 3 things she can control when the entire world went, sideways, was being there for her family, was making sure her finances were in order for her business, and making sure she moved her body every single day. So there are certain things that are within our span of control, as she calls it, and there are certain things that are not. And I think when things are uncertain, a lot of us have a tendency to micromanage all the sort of nonsense stuff on the side, which isn't actually moving anything forward. So it's like we're in a rocking chair. We're rocking back and forth, and there's a lot of movement. We're not going anywhere. So she says, think about what you need to do to move the needle about the things you care about. And then what are the things that are actually in your span of control and what aren't? The things that are not in your span of control, don't worry about it. Everything that is, control the hell out of those things.
I love this so much. And I love it
so
much.
Simple.
It's so simple, but it's also so poignant because it speaks to what drives the normal human response, which is fight or flee, right? In terms of fear. And it's really saying, well, how do we constructively deal with, if the prudent thing is to flee, what are we fleeing to and why?
Yes.
And if it's to fight, what are we fighting for and why?
Yes.
And I love that. I love that construct. And one of the things I think we also fight, and you mention it in your book, and I want us to talk about it, is also not just your secret sauce, but it's also recognizing the fact that you don't have to get approval about your secret sauce from other people. And you make a point of saying, don't work so hard to impress the people who don't matter. I wanted to say preach as I was looking at the line, but it's so true, because so often you're worried, not you, but we all are, about a third-party validation that at the end of the day doesn't matter. Can you speak to the narrative arc around why you thought it was important to have that as a component of Wonderhell and what people can do about it?
Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, I thought it was important to have in there because I needed to hear it. I think we all write books that we need. I think I spent a lot of my time trying to impress people who either didn't actually matter or who didn't really know me. Now, I put the people who don't actually matter in the camp of like all the people on Facebook that are like, I hope I get likes. And I pick people, the ones who don't actually know me, as my family, like my parents and my like people I've known for a million years. I love my parents, but the last time I lived in the same house as my parents, I was 17 years old. And so when I told them I was dropping out of law school to go to, work for some unknown governor from Arkansas, when I told them I was leaving the White House, when I told them I was leaving the big firm, when I told them I was selling my own, each time they were like, are you sure you should do that? Are you sure? Are you sure that makes sense? Are you sure it's gonna be okay? Not because they didn't think I could do it. They didn't know if I could do it because they didn't know me anymore. They had my best interest at heart, but they didn't know my heart. Like they don't know us. So many of the people in our lives who love us, they just don't want to see us get hurt, but they say these things and then they like create little seeds of doubt in our brain. And then they're like the frenemy types, right? The ones who are like all smiles in the front, but all knives in the back. And they see your growth and all they can see it through is the lens of their own stagnation, right? And they're the ones who are like, oh, that's great for you. And you don't hear it as their, uncertainty about themselves. You hear it about their uncertainty about you because we hear that tone of voice. And then they're the ones who are just plain scared. And usually these are like the old friends that you run into at the coffee shop who haven't seen in a decade, and you tell them about your big, crazy, hairy, scary goal. And they're like, you can't do that. That's too scary. What they really mean is, I can't do that. I'm too scared. But again, seeds of doubt that are planted. And I use the royal we here, maybe nobody else does this, but I definitely plant all those seeds in the same garden and I fertilize them exactly the same and I let them grow like crazy and I look at them all as if they're the same weight. And I think a lot of times we give votes to people in our lives who shouldn't have voices. And so, the chapter on the Ferris wheel, right, where you gain perspective on other people, each time we accomplish something and we realize that we're made of more, that there's something else in our lives, I think we should also look at the people who are in our lives and just making sure, like, look, I can't get rid of my parents. I love my parents, even if they don't know what I'm capable of today, but I can turn down the volume on some of their uncertainty and their doubt, right? I can turn up the volume on people like Carrie, Lorenz, right, who are cheering me on. And so I just think we have to make sure that at every age and every stage, we're turning up the volume on the right people and turning down the volume on the wrong people, because studies show, and I thought this was a fascinating study that I write about in the book, that if you have friends who are obese, for example, you are 57% more likely to be obese. But these friends don't have to be physically proximate to you. They can be people who you just ingest their content on social media. So if you have people on social media that are all about like hustle porn, what they think about becomes what you think about. What they socialize becomes what you socialize. What they normalize becomes what you normalize. So suddenly you're feeling like, I'm not going fast enough because I've got all these people telling me to crush it and 10x and all of that nonsense. So the study showed that the people who are around you don't have to be physically around you. They just have to be taking up your energy and your attention. So I just think we have to be really super mindful about our boundaries, about who we're letting in, both physically, but also emotionally, because that really becomes our future.
And I want, because I can see on the right-hand side, my parents looking and essentially saying, I hope that was not a silent comment to me to say, hi, parents, I see you over there. No,
I mean, my parents are great. I love my parents and they love me, but I think a lot of us have people, in our lives that we can't get rid of, right? And we certainly can't change them. So we have to decide how we hear them. And sometimes, we have to hear them a little less.
And beyond that, or in addition to that, I think the point is also your confidence in your ability to trust yourself comes from the act of trusting yourself. And people who are able to believe in what they can do, have more power and control to turn down the other voices, because they don't also have the echo chamber of their own self-doubt ringing in their head. And that's what the value of the tools that are provided in the book can do. It offers the skill set of being able to say, I can turn down that noise. I can turn down that rhetoric that's going on in the side, because the echo chamber that's on the other side is all about what is possible, as opposed to the risk of what's impossible.
Yes.
And
So, okay.
that,
So how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you, like, the best way to trust yourself doing something is to do something?
yes.
Like, how do you start? The way that you start is just to start. Here's this is another study that I quote in the book, is that the reason that Lucky Charms and talisman and things like that work are because the people who hold them assume they're going to work. That's it. That is the science behind luck, right? If you have something, like, you say you're carrying like a lucky rabbit's foot and you think the lucky rabbit's foot is going to help you win, just because you have it, it means you're probably going to do a little extra work and practice. You're like, I've got this rabbit's foot, it's all going to work out. Like, the people who have those things and they expect things to work out end up doing more of the things they need to do to make the thing work out. So it turns out that the belief that something is going to work out will change your behavior in the whole preparation process, so that when you get to the actual thing, you'll do better. And I thought that was incredible. I mean, talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like,
Yep.
so the way to do it is you don't have to, I talk in the book about how the first time I got on stage wearing head to toe Limitless yellow, it was terrifying. 5,000 people, and the announcer is like, welcome to the stage, Laura Gassner, auditing. And I'm like walking out there and there's 5,000 people. And I was terrified, but I walked out, like, you can't play small when you're wearing head to toe bright yellow. And I walked out with like my arms out and I was like, hello. And the crowd roared. So I roared back, and then I started, and that was it. Like, I didn't have to be brave for 60 minutes of the keynote. I just had to be brave for 60 seconds of the start. And I think a lot of times we overestimate how much courage we need to do the thing. We really only need courage to start the thing. And once you started, the momentum kind of takes over. So it's really not like, I think we need to lower the the barrier that we're putting up for ourselves and really see it for what it is, which is just, we don't have to have courage for the whole journey, just for the first step.
And what I love about that too is that we recognize, not just in the book, but again, as the world sort of crumbles around us, that even under the best case scenarios, the floor can come and be pulled from under you. And what you describe is, all right, well, this is what happens when the floor rips out. When the floor rips out, it's not the time to lose the courage. It's the time to allow the momentum that brought you to that place. I mean, my friends and I, we constantly say, you don't get to that place to just be at that place. There's like, you're not that far to just stay there, right? And so in the book, you talk about the beginner's mindset. Where and how can everyone walk through? All right, so because the thought for many of beginning again gets this exasperated sigh, like, but I did all the things. I don't want to do more. Like, I thought I was going to coast. And what the book does a great job of doing is there's no such thing as coast. There is never a coast as long as you are blessed to have breath in your lungs. The hard work is going to be there. There will never be a pure resting period. You can rest, but not quit. The quitting phase doesn't happen during our living phase. And so how and why should everyone learn now to adopt the beginner's mindset? What does that look like?
Yeah. So here's what I learned about the beginner's mindset is that if you don't decide to make the leap to the next thing, the decision is going to get made for you. And that's kind of it's kind of exciting and kind of terrifying, right? So I interviewed Whitney Johnson, who is, one of the top business thinkers in the world. And she told me about this thing called the S curve, where at the very bottom of the S, it's like, it's flat. You're trying to figure it out. Things are really hard. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I'm starting to get it. I'm picking it up. I understand what I'm doing. And then you're like, cool, I'm at the top now. I got it. Everything's good. It's all clicking and you're coasting along. And she goes, the problem is that the S ends eventually. And if you don't make the leap to the next S curve, you fall off the end and you start to self-sabotage. And I was like, yeah, that can't be true. Like, if you're successful and everything's great, like, why can't you just keep doing what you're doing? So she asked me to tell her a story about a time where I maybe didn't prepare well enough for a client meeting, or maybe I wasn't ready for, you know, an event as much as I thought I would be. And I thought about it for a moment in our interview. And then I remembered this moment where I walked in to like a scion of Wall Street's office, you know, it was like Gordon Gekko type thing, looking over all of Central Park. And he was like, you know, we want you to find us the next head of our family office, of our family foundation. Now, I had not done any research on this guy at all. The story does not make me look very good. I walked in completely ill prepared. In the elevator on the way up, I was like researching him. And what I found was not a lot, because he's super private, except that he has like 6 homes, and every one of them has an ice rink outside of it, because his kids love to play ice hockey, including the one in the Bahamas, by the way. So I guess we're not giving money to the environment, right? So we're on the way up, and he's like, I sit at this table, and there's like 15 lawyers around us. And he says, okay, we want you to find us the head of our new family foundation. I'm getting a little older, so maybe we should give to hospitals, because I want to get good care. And my kids are getting a little older, and so we want to give to some colleges so they can get into good colleges. Can you do that for me? And I literally stood up and I extended my hand, and I was like, thank you, sir. I don't think that we're the firm for you. You've got like 17 lawyers outside this office, and they can all write those checks. I think you know what you want to do. So thank you so much. And all the lawyers sitting in the room like gasped, like, and then they didn't breathe. And he was like, well, what would you do? And I said, well, you know, from our extensive research, it seems like you're super private, so you probably don't want your name on a lot of things. And also you're very committed to your kids' sports. So what if we created a partnership between colleges and healthcare centers to create the foremost research project on childhood concussions from sports? And he was like, great, find me that person. All the lawyers exhaled. And I was like, what if I found you somebody who spent more than 17 minutes and actually helped you create a family philanthropy strategy? And he was like, okay, good, do that. And on the way in the elevator downstairs, I texted my business partner. I'm like, I think it's time for me to leave. Like, that would have been malpractice. Like, it only worked out well because I had been doing it for 15 years at that point, and I was like dancing around it enough that I knew what to do. But I had been mailing in, and I was at the top of my S curve. And had that not gone as well as it had, it would have damaged my reputation, my firm's reputation, my staff's reputation, his family philanthropy reputation. And that's what happens when we get to the top of that S curve. And so I hadn't been making a decision about what I wanted to do next, but that decision was starting to get made for me. And so that happens to a lot of us, and we don't realize it's happening until something goes really wrong. And so, you know, Whitney's advice is you have to think about where you are at the top of the S curve. Her second piece of advice is, if you're thinking about making that leap, you can't just pack your backpack. You have to pack the backpacks of all those people around you also, because they're also going with you on that journey.
And
Excuse
while
me.
we have that, no, we want you to be able to breathe and get that out, because taking care of ourselves is one of the critical components too. I'm looking at the time, and so I want to make sure we make room and space for questions. I don't see anything in the chat, but do we have questions? And Anne will call on everyone because I can't necessarily see, but I do want to make sure, while you have the opportunity to get the wisdom from Laura in real life right here and now, that we leave some space in order to do it. Do we see anything? If not, don't you worry, because I've got more questions, and I'll wait, I see, and I'm able to see a hand. Angela.
There's my little hand. First of all, congratulations, Laura. Thank you.
Hi, Angela.
So much. So good to see you. So I love the quote that you said, every new level has a new devil. And I would love to just understand better how you discern from that voice motivating you for something you're supposed to do for your purpose, or something that's just being driving you because of ambition for ambition's sake. Because again, it's like sometimes you get to a new level, and for me, let me speak for myself, you can't be satisfied there. You're always wanting more. So how do you differentiate between the two?
Oh, I asked myself a very simple question, and it's this: would success in this thing get me more of what I want or less of what I want? So here's a very specific example. When I ran my search firm, we got a call from a private school. It was a religiously oriented private school. And we had never done any work in that area before. My business partner was like, amazing, we're going to have a whole new line of business. And I was like, no, they are the hardest clients ever, because the board is made up of a bunch of parents who all feel like they're holier than thou because it's a religiously oriented school, and they cannot separate their parent hat from their steward of the organization board member hat, right? This is like, they had, like, in the pantheon of nonprofit organizations that you do executive search for, like, private schools are hard, and religiously oriented private schools are the hardest. So I said to her, I said, if we are successful in this thing, what does it get us? It gets us more of those schools. We don't want them. Like, they're so hard. So if you're driving towards something and that thing is like the next big promotion, the next big office, the next big whatever, and what that gets you is more of what you want because it's giving you more leverage, more power, more resources, more connection, great. If it gets you less of what you want in your life, but just like on paper, maybe there's more money, it's a fancier title, do those things then get you more of what you want? And so I think a lot of times, and I don't know, maybe this is blasphemy, but like, I read Lean In 2013, like everybody else, and I didn't like it. I knew I was supposed to like it. I'm part of the Legion of Women. I was supposed to like, awesome. And it's not that I had issues with Sheryl Sandberg about how she achieved success. Like, every one of us should use every ounce of our privilege to like get everything in the world. Awesome. My issue was how she defined success. And she defined success only as this one singular myopic, fastest path to the corner office. And for a lot of us, what we want in life doesn't look like that, or maybe it doesn't look like that now, right? We can have it all, but maybe we want to have different, we define all differently at different times. And so I would just ask myself, if I were you, does getting to that place that's considered successful in the outside world jibe with what I consider successful inside for me right now? When we're 17, 18, 19 years old and somebody says, pick a path, pick a major, pick a college, we go, okay. And then we create this plan for the rest of our lives. And we literally don't have a frontal lobe in that moment. And so we're changing, we are growing, the world around us is changing, right? So it would go to figure that our definition of all, right, of success will change as well. So I would ask myself that question: does this, what's on the other side of this thing, get me more of what I want or less of what I want?
Thank you.
And we have time for one more question. And I see this one in the queue from Pollyanna. And it asks, you mentioned on the journey, we'll experience a tsunami of emotions depending on what stage we are at in our life. What is your relationship with mental health, and how do you manage your emotions so they don't get the best of you in making important decisions, navigating business, etc.?
My relationship with mental health is very different now than it was in 2019. So when the pandemic started, I, like a lot of us, just stopped sleeping, right? Between, like, my job was to write books and fly to events and speak on stages. Well, I suddenly did not know what to write about. There were no planes to no events to no stages. So I had to reinvent my entire business after having just sold my last business in 2016 and reinventing myself as an author. So I was like, I was already exhausted, starting all over again. And I also had 2 teenage boys at home, a husband with a very stressful career. And all of a sudden they were like in my house. Like, I'm used to working at home. Awesome. That was not a hard transition, but I wasn't used to working with all of them here too, right? Like, suddenly there was a lot on my plate, and I know a lot of you can relate to that. So I stopped sleeping. And after like 3 months of not sleeping, I couldn't remember numbers. I stopped being able to form sentences. Like, it was impacting my brain. So I went to go see a psychiatrist, and I was like, I think there's something wrong with me, doc. Like, what's wrong with my brain? And he diagnosed me fairly quickly as being a very boring person who was an overachiever who can no longer overachieve. That was it. That was my diagnosis. And he was like, Lori, it's like, you're kind of an overachiever. And I'm like, yeah, that's a feature, not a bug. And he's like, yeah, but it's not tenable. We can work on that. And I was like, no, I'm fine. And he checkmated, and he goes, but you're here. I was like, you got me. So we spent some time talking about that. And then he said something hyper profound to me, which was this: you don't have to give the trophies back.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I imagine, you know, that video of Roger Federer, like on the NetJets commercial, like pulling that giant wagon of trophies. I was like, oh, shit. I think I had spent a lot of my time going back to that question of who we're trying to impress, like picking up the awards, picking up the trophies, doing all the things, like volunteering for every committee, like making sure that I was doing all the things all the time. And when he said you don't have to give the trophies back, he goes, you are still the sum total of everything that you have done. It's all right to just, as you said, to rest, right? I'm not quitting. We're just resting right now. And so my relationship with that now on the other side of the pandemic, having been through then in 2021 an illness that I wasn't sure I'd make it to 2022 from, is I now spend a lot of time asking myself, what's the trophy for? Is it for my ego? Right? Is it for my bank account? Is it a pedestal on which I stand that helps me get to the next thing that I actually really want? Or am I just collecting the trophies because I was told that I was supposed to collect the trophies? And when I can't make that decision myself, I try to surround myself with people who are truth tellers in my life. Some of them are aspirationals, people like Carrie Lorenz, who, I want to be her when I grow up. So like, she's a good person to bounce ideas off of. Some of them are peers. And those peers are the ones that are in the foxhole with me. I complain to, and we learn from each other and we grow together, we celebrate together. And some of those people are mentees also, because I think the best way to figure out what we really want is to sort of walk somebody else through it and help them through it and to see if we're really still excited about it. So for me, a lot of it is asking myself those questions about what the purpose of the trophy is, and then running that by other people.
Well, this has been awesome. And I'm saying that from on my behalf, just walking through, because going through your book really was an exercise. And we spend so much time on the list talking about community and being in conversation and really working off the reality that no one's in this alone. This is a collective. If one person is feeling it, we probably have a plethora of women and humans who are feeling it across all genders, across all spectrums, across all divides. And that creates, it eradicates the division, right? Because
Yes.
that's the collective community. And your book really does center it with such a great narrative. So thank you to you. I'm passing this over to Anne. I'm thanking everyone, both related to me by choice or related to me by community or force, for joining today. And just thank you. We're all in gratitude. And thank you to Anne and the list. Back to you.
Thank you both so much. I really appreciate it.
I loved this conversation. I couldn't imagine a more powerful duo to talk to us about the feelings around being around power and ambition and success. And so I have notes. I've had social media posts. I've posted links to your book, everyone. If you haven't bought Laura's book yet, please do. I am so thrilled and grateful for both of you for being here today and sharing your time and your wisdom with us. And to all of the community out there listening, buy the book, review the book, tell your friends about the book. And I also posted a link for our next bestsellers list conversation. So please join us for that one too. I thank you all very much. And I will get you to your 2:00 meeting with 2 minutes to spare.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.